Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I was trying to go live on Instagram. I don't think it just worked, but oh well, it's good. I am so excited to be here today. It's going to be the last episode of the year, and we're going to talk about 2024 food and beverage trends. And with me today, we're going to prepare our palates, as the title says here. With me today in the bottom corner is Amber Kispert. She is the senior content producer for Catersource and the special event. To her left or right, whatever way we're looking at it, is Chris Sanchez, who is the managing partner at Lux Group, leading brands like Lux Catering and Events. And he also serves on the Leading Caterers of America Steering Committee and the ICA, International Caterers Association Board. Awesome. And then to my left is Jen. I forgot to ask you how to say this, but Bargisen? Bargisen. Sorry about that, Jen. She is the Senior Vice President of Culinary for Sodexo Live and overseeing convention centers, stadiums, and what was the other thing?
Zoos, aquariums, things like
zoos,
that.
Aquariums. Okay, awesome. Well, you all are going to bring a variety of different perspectives to this conversation, so I'm very excited about that. One of the questions that I want to start with is, Amber, you wrote an article for Catersource, and you asked my friend Todd from Crew Catering in Charleston about trends, and his response back to you is, trends, what do they mean and why? So I really want to ask for each of you, what does a trend mean to you, and why are they important? Amber, you want to start with answering that?
Well, it's hard to answer because a trend means something different to each person. So whether it's a food trend or a flower trend or things like that. But I think trends are more like they're different than fads, because fads come and go. They might be popular for a couple of months and then they peter off. Whereas a trend, I think they grab hold of the industry more and they have a longer standing power. So like some of the trends that obviously like local sourcing, that was a trend that came up how many years ago, and it's still every year we're talking about that. So I think it's things that impact the industry, they're popular, and they have staying power.
Okay, awesome. Jen, what about you?
I was actually going to kind of lean into the same concept. To me, local was exactly one of the places I went when we started talking about trends. It's something we've been talking about forever. And yet to me, how I define that today versus when the initial conversation started, probably 10 years ago now, right? I do think it means something totally different at this point, and the importance of it. And ultimately where I answer the trend question is on the guest/fan experience, whatever that event is. That's really what the trend is. Mm-hmm. In my mind, it's how to meet them at that full experience, whether it's the flowers or the food or whatever that may be.
Right. Cool. And Chris, what about you?
I think trends are an interesting thing because it's regional as well, right? Or even by country. And so things that may have been popular 5 years ago in LA are just catching up in Utah. So it is kind of a moving wave. I like to stay on top of those trends to make sure that we're relevant to our industry and making sure that we're providing like the most interesting and unique opportunities for our clients, especially with planners coming in from other states, being relevant in that sphere where they're like, hey, well, we want this unique action station, or sustainability and local sourcing, regional sourcing are really critical to us. And all of a sudden you're like, I don't know anything about that. So I think it's really critical to stay a part of that conversation and making sure that even though something may be cookie bars are very popular on the East Coast or Midwest, and in Utah, I had no idea what that was. So listening to the planners, listening to the clients, and kind of getting insights into those, like make sure that we are on top of our game. So I think they're really important in that conversation.
I love that because too, I mean, and as you said it, because planners and their attendees are coming to your state or your stadium or your convention center from all over the world. And so what they're seeing in their different countries or where they live might be different than what you're experiencing. So making collaborating and pulling all of those things together is really important.
Well, and a lot of times they want to see what your region offers as well. Most of the time, that's kind of, speaking of trends, where we are right now is people want to come to Utah and see what the local products are offering, see what the local experiences are. If I fly to Austin for a conference, they want to see what's going on in Austin. I want to eat barbecue. So I think speaking of trends, that's definitely something that's a part of that experience.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that and say that's exactly it. We always have to go and say, how do we make it? It's easy to say, how do we make it uniquely New Orleans, right? But what does Denver feel like? What does Indianapolis feel like? And the meeting planners, that has definitely been a consistent. We want it to be approachable, maybe some items that we can learn from, but moreover, how do I know I'm uniquely in Indianapolis or Cleveland or Chicago, right?
Yeah.
One big trend that I've seen lately is the fusion experience, where people are coming to Utah, but they want to emphasize all of their corporate headquarters across the country. And so we're doing like Dutch food and South African food, and then Austin, Texas, and Mississippi, all at the same event. So, I mean, it can kind of get wild that way.
I did a party like that at the big hotel in Utah. What's that hotel called? The Big
America.
and the Little. Yeah, Grand America. I did that one for my old corporate company. We wanted to do different foods from different areas of the U.S. So, yeah. Okay, so 2024 flavors. What are you expecting new flavor? I mean, how do we incorporate flavors? And one of the things, tangent on that, is that a lot of these trends we see are pushed towards restaurants. How are we then taking those trends and incorporating them into catered food functions for a group of 10 versus a group of 17,000? And Amber, I know you've done your article touches on that. So if you could start with that, and then Chris and Jen jump in on what flavors you think you're going to be introducing onto your menus.
I mean, there's such a split between restaurants and catering now in terms of trends, like, because everybody is kind of looking at the same concept, the experiential, the sensory, the immersive. And I think it can translate to either way, no matter what the specific trend is. So, like, one of the trends that I saw for flavors was the spicy, the sweet heat. I mean, that can translate to either way. I mean, it doesn't really matter how many people you're serving to. It's just the ingredient. And I love, like, the hot honey trend was so big the last couple of years, but now it's expanding to be like mango habanero and all those kind of things. And I love the sweet, spicy concept.
It hits a variety of different touch points in your mouth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think fusion is really big. I know this is all trends come and go. We're seeing bell bottoms come back, right? I think fusion is really big. Like, we're doing gochujang tacos. So, like, fusing two different cultures together, and people are obsessed. And so, like, bringing in the heat, people are definitely loving heat and flavor and color. And then in addition to that, like I said, the fusion of the experiences, because our cultures have all fused so much, right? It's not just like certain regions aren't just those regions anymore. Like, certain countries have evolved. And so bringing those same offerings to our event experiences, I think, is really critical. I mean, I've had a client recently who said, we're not doing a white party anymore. That's too gauche. So now it's going to be a fusion party. So it's color and different food types, introducing multiple flavor types or cuisine types from different regions into the same dish. And so, like, there's a lot of focus on that. I think companies are trying to say, like, we're diverse, we have a unique offering here, and they want their events to represent the same experience.
Very cool. Jen?
Yeah, I'd say where we're focusing is kind of on the classically less is more, right?
Okay.
So if you're going to do that exploration into the Korean fried chicken scenario, you don't also have to add 4,000 other things, or maybe do it. Some of the things in particular in our convention centers that we've really been discussing lately as we look to our forward menu planning. The idea that we traditionally had all these stations that had every representation of gluten-free and chicken and beef and pork, because we all know it has to be there. How about just simply doing the gochujang taco correctly, with maybe a masa maker out there and actually getting really deep into those flavors and the experience. And we're really exploring that a lot more than we have. Whether it's the footprint of those types of scenarios and the finances of them and some of the different meeting planner considerations. But at the same time, it allows us to really make a meaningful experience around it, right? Not just put out a lot of different options.
Well, and let's just jump on that real quick, because I think too, like going to events and especially at convention centers, you have this massive amount of food, right? And you're trying to meet a variety of different dietary needs and flavors and cultures and whatever. But can we do the same type of presentation with it still being the wow factor with less quantity of things for sustainability purposes?
Well, and I think like perfect example of that, some of the things that we've been using to drive our menuing and look to the forward path are the Future 50 food report that came out a while ago now, but that discussion of, 75% of the planet eating 12 to 18 foods and all of the agriculture that's around that. So when you start looking at some of the foods that are recommended to get diversity in our food supply and in our events, things like nopal, right? Yes, traditionally has been a food out there, but when you start to give somebody a nopal taco, right now it's an education point, but they're not sitting there going, oh, where is the shrimp and the beef, right? So it allows you to hit plant-based initiatives, hit initiatives that make it different and new and interesting. I'm not saying it's the right for every location, but that's the type of scenarios where we see that those solutions fit best.
Okay.
When I think to speak to what you're asking, Tracy, what Jen's point was even with the masa, right? Like it's a beautiful ingredient and really leaning into that and using it as a platform. And you can do bowls made out of that. You can do like a tamale bowl. Like there's all kinds of beautiful things. And it's such a simple ingredient that's so versatile and a fairly sustainable ingredient. I mean, we could get really deep into the ins and outs of that experience, but I won't for now. But as far as the presentation goes, like really leaning into the design of that and bringing out that ingredient as a core focus. Again, education. We're doing a lot of signage with our stations now that are teaching the guests why that's important, what the ingredient is, like the ins and outs of the allergy or dietary restrictions of it. And so like really immersifying, immersing your guests in the experience of that ingredient as a focus and then adding elements to it to enhance it.
That's really cool. Yeah. Because I think like teaching people about different ingredients, teaching people about different types of dishes is really important in thinking about how we're looking at our world and very global, that's very small at the same time, but also thinking about the sustainability aspect of it too. Okay, so jumping from that a little bit too is presentation styles. Somebody asked me the other day, what are the current presentation styles? I'm like, I think we've gone back to pre-COVID. There's lots of buffets and stations, but are you, and the hand sticking out of the wall and handing you a glass of champagne, right? What are you seeing presentation style wise? There was one I actually went to a couple of weeks ago and they were grilling the steaks hanging from, the heat was below and they were grilling the steak was hanging above it with the herbs on top. And it was from somewhere in South America that they got that concept from. So, but things like that, what are you all projecting to do?
I think it's all back. I think like all the immersive experiences, the food stations, we're doing raclette stations, we're doing churrasco, I think is what you were describing maybe. All of those types of experiences, they're fully back and people want that engagement, right? We went through that period of time where it was very restrictive and much more, we had to stay apart from each other. And for those of us in the event space and many others, we wanted to be connected. And so we found ways to make that happen with safe distancing. And I don't even want to go too deep down that road because it's PTSD for us. But I do think that providing those experiences, which is tough when we get into the hundreds or thousands of people with a raclette station, my chefs start having nightmares and fits. So like it is a little more challenging and coming up with unique ways to do that, which I'm sure Jen can speak to beautifully. But we are really seeing a return of that family style service, restaurant quality experiences at events is really a critical thing. And it's not going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Chris, kind of some of the same festivals and some of those large format, I kind of tend to see it a little bit of a different way, that they're the perfect opportunity for us to explore those, right? The fans in the NFL or NEC, they come out because they just crave that experience, but they want each and every one of those concepts to tell them they're quintessentially in Texas or whatever. So it translates right back into convention center spaces. I think one thing we're trying to be cautious of is not chase the fads, right? Not start hanging things in the middle of a ballroom if we don't actually mean to, execute it to that degree. So it's always that balance. But I agree with you. It's absolutely the experience. The other thing that we're really driving into that I think COVID stripped it away and everybody's working on trying to figure out how to inject it, but the service and the hospitality components, while all the mixology is amazing and it's awesome, there's so many other service elements that we do as an industry that we're really working on getting back to that. Whether it's, we just had a plated event for something and we discussed ordering tableside, right? Do we want to introduce those elements? Even though it seems like something we've traditionally done, obviously through COVID, a lot of those elements got stripped away, and a lot of the things that make them really special events, whether it's a gala event or does every single lunch, even if it's for 10,000, have to be huge, large format buffets that are up and down in 45 minutes, or could we do them in ways that we are hand making the masa tacos there and having even a little bit more of a quick serve type of experience, but you can at least talk to the guests and they can choose their offerings.
Well, and I mean, I think, and Amber, I'm going to ask you the same question too, but I also think too, because one of the trends that I saw was food halls. Food halls are, what did somebody tell me? They're the malls. It's a version of the mall food court, right? I mean, that's basically what a food hall is, but an upper level. But catered events are kind of like that in general. I'm like, we've been doing that for years.
Front of what Jen was mentioning with like wanting to go to Texas and have those tacos, like we're seeing the same with concession trends. Like some of the contracts that we operate in concessions, they're wanting not just a nacho, they want something more elevated. They want a special kind of slider or a special kind of other element. It's not just the traditional corn dog. Now it's Korean corn dogs. So I think even taking even concession foods and elevating is really a trend right now.
Well, and when I was in Atlanta and I went to the Braves game, I remember when they would bring the opposing team. And I remember when Baltimore came and played, and I'm an Orioles fan, that they brought the crab cake in. And that was one of the concessions. And so same along those same lines. So I like that. Amber, what did you find in your research across the country about presentation styles?
It's definitely like the making the moment. Like, I mean, and public showing guests something that they have never seen before. Like, I know, like, even just in my experience, if I'm at a wedding or an event, I'm not necessarily remembering what I ate. It's how it was served and just that kind of that instant Instagrammable moment.
Right.
So, like, I mean, I know I've seen some where, like, guests, it's also the interactive aspect too, where guests will, like, plant seeds and their dish will pop up out of a plant. I mean, or they have to go dig for their dessert in like a flower pot. I mean, it's those interactive elements and getting the guest to experience something completely different and new.
Well, and I also think another trend along that line is with all of the frictionless service starting to happen everywhere, there's this whole other delivery component happening in our end of it, right? It's great that you made the Korean corn dog, right? But how do you tell them what it is? How do you tell them it's an awesome flavor? How do you tell them it's Jennifer's amazing recipe or this local farmer, all those? It's all around the delivery of that. And it certainly isn't kind of the old clamshell type of scenario or the old classic boat, right? All of those, if you think of the Japanese sandwiches, right? And all of the packaging and signage and discussion, they tell that story all the way through that product. So in those types of environments and even into convention centers, we've had to talk a lot more about what is the story of this? What is the purpose of it being on there? And what do we want to convey about it in the long run?
That's really cool. And just for everybody, frictionless is like, how can I walk up and scan QR code and walk out, right? Getting that bottle of water or drink or whatever without too much interaction, but which kind of also it's not too much interaction with the server per se, so they can get back to the people that they want to talk to. Okay, well, actually, let's jump on that note really quickly on staffing wise. What are we seeing staffing wise with the trend? I mean, we've heard that somebody told me the other day that they were back to full staffing capacity at their property. Are you seeing that? Are people coming back, or are we having to change the types of presentation styles to match the staffing that we have or don't have?
I think so. We're seeing staffing pretty much back to pre-COVID pace in most areas. But what I would definitely say is whole new diverse staffing patterns as far as people just coming out of hospitality schools that actually really do want to make their degree and their passion around high volume or catering or things like that was not traditionally the case 20 years ago, right? So whole different thought pattern on how to deliver and a whole different discussion around, are we going to make the shot glasses out of ice and they're going to throw them into the fire at the end because this is a clickbait moment, right? All of those types of things are starting to be more of the patterns we're seeing through our staff, and we're getting the ideas from everywhere, which I think is phenomenal versus just saying, if you know how to do it for 100,000 people, that's the only way you know how to do it. So right. To me, that's the best thing probably that has come out of the post-COVID scenarios is we've had to look at all these different bits of people that were maybe non-traditional into our environment and going, wow, it is great that you have this background. Look at all the different things you can contribute.
I would agree. I think we're in the same position. I think we're actually getting a more robust workforce than we ever had before. I mean, we all went through the experience of the last few years where it was like no staff or hard to find staff. And then but I think we're really into a great space right now with really qualified staff and trainable staff who actually wants to participate in that experience. Not only that, obviously, there's the ins and outs of it, but generally speaking, a really qualified staff that's excited to be a part of the experience and is wanting to do these experiences that we're talking about, like Jen mentioned. Yeah. So I would completely agree.
Well, and I think the hunger and the thirst of the public and the fans and the guests is palpable around the service elements to me, whether I'm just out as a guest somewhere or whether I'm walking stadiums or convention centers where you can feel that lack of interaction, that lack of human touch, that lack of storytelling around why Salt Lake is so uniquely different and all those scenarios. It's craveable out there in the public.
Awesome. Amber, anything to add to that?
The only thing that I'm kind of curious to see where it goes is the use of robots to kind of augment some of the lack of staff, because I'm seeing a lot more, especially in like hotels and things like for room service. And so I could see like a robot bringing a drink over to somebody at an event, and I want to see how it works.
Yeah. I saw some at the restaurant show this year, and it was pretty interesting. And even ones that had separate compartments and you had your own code as your room, and you could only open that one compartment of that robot. So I think we'll probably see some of that at some point. I'm sure.
I think any type of automation is critical. I think as our workforce is developing, there's also the need to have automation. So I feel excited about that opportunity. I will share with you that recently I was at a property in Seattle that had robots, and it was stuck on the elevator because it was being too polite. So it was nervous to cross the threshold with people standing there. I have photos that I'll share gladly later. But it was very cute. It had a tuxedo on and its name badge and everything. So I love the concept. And I mean, from a hotel perspective, I would even love to figure out how to incorporate it on events. Imagine having a tray pass robot going around. I think it's fantastic. I'm not sure how far. I mean, with the right resources, you could automate your entire kitchen. As Jen knows, like there's something magic about your hands. There's something magic that comes from a chef who can put in this special quality and experience there. But I do think that there's absolutely a future in that space. And it is, I think, something to quickly gather around. Right now, I think it's a little gimmicky, which is cute. We all love it. Like, how many of us see a robot in the elevator and are like, oh my God, that's adorable. But I do think there's a space that will come for it. And I think it's necessary. I think as we're talking about work-life balance, for example, like your employees don't want to work 60 hours or plus, like chefs of the past or currently. In the case of our chefs, I'm sure ours are watching and are like, what are you talking about? As we're coming up the hills of the holidays. But I think having some automations in the kitchen, even in my father was a chef, and even like the dicers and all the different equipment now that we have in our kitchens do help. So I don't think it's replacing employees. I actually think it's just streamlining and making it a more efficient experience. That's more because as costs increase, there's got to be some efficiencies that come with those experiences to make it so that it's sustainable.
That's a really good point. Somebody just posted on here, robots are delivering on college campuses. They saw it at University of Arizona, but then replied, but can a robot control guest consumption, i.e. taking 5 jumbo shrimp?
I wish.
Yeah, that would be hard to do in a reception kind of thing. But I do agree with you on, Jen, you and I were chatting before the show about scratch kitchens and versus pre-pack ordering everything. But I love how Chris just tied that in there. Like, hey, we've got these machines that are going to dice your carrots for you, which streamlines that process. So it's still makes it a scratch kitchen versus buying it?
There's a lot of automation that can happen behind the scenes, whether it's around food safety elements, whether it's around logistics and validating the movement of things and equipment. Obviously, a lot of the commercial equipment that we use, once I determine a recipe, I can make sure that every single oven I have in the entire country always cooks it that way if I want to. So I can be a scratch kitchen and yet still support a lot of those technology points. So yes, I think there's a lot around it. I do think the robot end of it can be gimmicky. A lot of the tasks in the hotels do make a lot of sense around the redundant scenarios. I've seen they're very supportive of bringing the supplies for housekeeping, and yet there's still a housekeeper that would be in there and do those human touches and make sure. So I think we have opportunity in some of those zones potentially. But I think it's a fine line there, right? Whether it looks like it's cool and fun and whether it feels like that, or I've seen several where they're the beverage programming, right? Where you can make your drinks or some of those, or ice creams or things, right? They're fun, but then if they don't work, they're not as much fun.
Right.
Right. I've seen a lot of phenomenal. So around the question around the shrimp, I've seen a ton of great technology in stadiums to control consumption through a whole stadium. Somebody can walk up to the walls and pour their beer, and yet it knows who you are and knows you're not. It's the third quarter or whatever that may be. So I think there's a lot there, and it makes it a better experience, but it's just vetting out which ones are the right ones.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I interviewed somebody with the push the button and here's your old fashioned, right? And it helps the servers deliver the drinks faster to the tables versus tying up the bartender waiting to make 5 zillion drinks, but which I think would be the same kind of concept at a stadium too. Okay. I want to go back to flavor perspectives as well on trends. Two more topics on that, like the health and wellness / functional. Are you tying any of those? Because a lot of people are looking for their food and beverage to be a lot more functional for them, to make sure it's healthier, more nutritious. Are you incorporating those things as well? Or are we going to the side of nobody cares about their health when they're at an event. They want to just eat whatever they want.
It's a mix. It's a mix, right? Because you certainly get the event still that want a corn dog and tater tots and French fries. It still happens, right? We get a bride who wants that. We get corporate clients who want health focus, right? So it's 100% like we want green smoothies and we want all of these elements. What I mainly find is a little more in the middle, right? We want to serve our guests, but we want to make sure that these dietary restrictions and allergies are covered. We want to make sure that these elements of health are a focus, but not necessarily the end all. We want our food to still taste good. That's really where I see the trend is, right? I see it more like we want sustainable products, but we don't want everybody to have a vegetarian option, but we don't want everybody to have a stuffed mushroom anymore. We want to have something more high end and more considerate, more thoughtful food. So it's not necessarily like this health focus, at least from my perspective. We do get a couple every year that are like, it has to be this, but I find it's more about sustainability in that space more than anything.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is obviously, again, the local, right? So if you're going to give me something that's elk in Colorado, that probably will prevail over maybe a plant-based discussion potentially. But I do think some of the trends that we're seeing evolving are the idea of just looking at the demographics of the group and saying, well, clearly you have so many that are X and now we're going to plan a menu that's that way. I think the general public is so exposed to all of these different flavors, and gochujang is not that abnormal for people at home anymore, right? Plant-based scenarios, people are eating that way all the time. It doesn't have anything necessarily to do with where they came from or particular interest. People are excited about I'll say non-cultivated plant-based offering, right? Even though I know all plants are cultivated, but I do think that part of it is taking over a lot more.
So putting the plant back in plant-based.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you offer
more real food, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Real food. Yeah, exactly. I think the general public, when you're looking at a lot of the trends, the idea of non-processed is taking hold huge. So right. Telling that in our spaces, that doesn't mean, obviously it's the one time you're going to this amazing concert that you've been waiting all year. Of course you're going to go. Give me the full fat, but the whole idea that everybody wants a mac and cheese bar, everybody wants a mashed potato bar kind of scenario, I think is long gone.
Okay. Amber, what else did you find chatting with?
Yeah, I think it's like Chris said, it's a matter of giving people the choice and the options. Like I was at a conference and they had both just regular like iced lattes on tap, but then they also had like energy lemonade, which is more the functional beverage side. So it's giving the people the option to go the healthy route or just go with the comfort and what they're used to and what they're craving at that moment.
Okay, cool. Chris, one thing that you said a second ago is like, well, healthy and it still needs to taste good, but can't they both happen at the same time?
100%.
Healthy and taste. Okay.
Yes, but the world that we existed in for a very long time was healthy had to be disgusting.
Right.
Right. Or if you had a vegetarian diet or a gluten-free diet, God forbid, you were getting the worst product. You were getting terrible bread, terrible crackers. And just even in the last few years has that evolved into a really beautiful, conscious product that is like actually edible by all audiences. And so it's exciting. I think that's really what people want. They want to have good food. And my partner and I, as we travel across the world, right? I mean, you leave the US and it's not uncommon to have organic, good quality food at a really good price. Whereas then you come back and all of a sudden you get the stomach ache because we're going back to processed foods. It's a little exaggerated, certainly. But I do think that's evolving here now. And I think and people are wanting that and they're needing that and their bodies are telling them that, right? Because the products that we put into our milk and into our bread have gone so far as to make us sick. And so without getting too political, I think that it's really good to have this new evolution because people are watching what they eat and not in our mother's way of healthy, right? Where we're like eating or drinking Diet Coke because that's healthier than Coke. We're talking about like going back to those core products like the masa and things like that. That's like, we're looking at that ingredient and then we're bringing in the fullness of that ingredient so it can taste delicious.
Awesome. One Facebook user, I think I know who this is like, my 13-year-old equates healthy with not fun. So we can make it fun, right? It doesn't have to be, How do you do that, Jen? And when you're trying to make a healthy food and make it for the people who are like, oh, that's gluten-free and curling their nose up it, but it's a delicious gluten-free.
I don't know if this is going to be overly trend forward. Some could say it's the anti-trend, but the truth is you get the best ingredients at the right part of the season and do minimal amounts to them, right? And you meet that expectation. Have you ever been with your child or somebody else's, your niece or nephew or whatever, and taken them out and picked berries with them in the season, right? Have you ever, even though they go, oh my gosh, not beets, you go, great, let me actually pull it out of the ground and give you a beet with very minimal done to it. And everybody suddenly awakens to those flavors because in a lot of those processes, not that they're the wrong thing for all, I mean, they're the right thing sometimes. Everybody enjoys their mac and cheese that comes out of a box or whatever that may be. But when you suddenly awaken those flavors again, even if it's something like somebody that grows chicken near you and you get a fresh one that way, right? All of a sudden the flavor is exciting, right? Especially if it's locally driven and it's something you can only get in the Southwest, right? Like I don't anticipate necessarily being in Ohio and really enjoying our cactus taco, right? But if I'm in the Southwest and it comes right off of a wood-fired oven, almost like artichokes, suddenly you go, oh my gosh, I've never had that flavor before. And it's all healthy, but probably anti-trend, but it's just reminding ourselves of those types of scenarios again, whether it's in beverage or food.
Right.
Jen, I think it's dead on. I just had an experience at a 2 Michelin star restaurant and it was all grown at their farm. And if you're there in the winter, you're getting pickled vegetables. And if you're there in the summer, you're getting fresh off the farm. And then when they're out of that product, they don't serve it anymore. And I really think that bringing that to the masses in our events industry is so critical because I do believe that is the trend, actually. In fact, I think that's where the world is heading. And I think it's so critical that we find a sustainable way to do that. I think it's so important that we bring people good food, especially as the masses that you certainly serve with the Sodexo group. I think on a smaller scale, what I do, it's a lot of people and bringing them that experience and making them take home the gochujang concept. And now they're going to make it at home or look at making their own kimchi or different things like that. Like, I think it's such a powerful bonding experience as a society. I think it's so powerful.
Well, and I think that it starts in our menuing. A lot of the menuing now, because of all the drive for custom menuing, and we want our event, I think we would all say 20 years ago, meeting planners maybe would open a menu and go, yeah, I'll take the Italian menu this night. I'll take the Mexican menu that night, those types of scenarios.
It still happens, unfortunately.
But we're seeing probably 70-80% custom drive, even in high.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Even in very
Okay.
high. So in that is a huge opportunity to say, yes, tomatoes aren't in season, so we're probably not going to do a burrata salad then, or if we do, we're going to drive it around stone fruits or things of that nature that I think have allowed for a huge opportunity for us to have those discussions. In many of our large convention centers, we actually do have farms there, and we work with local farmers that are harvesting it and students and things like that. Yes, and we can have that discussion and go, yeah, you're going to be getting what's seasonal, not what we're all used to seeing year round.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So on that sustainability side of that, what I interviewed a couple months ago about regenerative agriculture, and I chatted with the chef a couple of weeks ago too. And he's like, well, nobody here likes to, none of our customers like the taste of grass-fed beef. Like they want the flavor of the beef that they've known of, but regenerative is that form of sustainability and the way that we're growing our food. So do you see that kind of farming practices or still commercial? We can't feed the masses of 17,000 with a regenerative agriculture farm at this point, I don't think. But how do you see sustainability wise in other fashions coming into the menus? And Amber, pipe in with what you've learned.
I was just gonna. So I just did an article for our fall issue on a bunch of caterers that they have their own farms on property that they're using for ingredients, and it's more of a niche thing that they'll offer for smaller events or as an upsell opportunity. And I think that's kind of the key is, yes, you cannot feed a 5,000 person event with your backyard farm, but you can just have those little additions that make it more sustainable and things like that. And then you bring the guests out to the property and they kind of see how much work goes into these products and then maybe that is what their choice in going forward as well.
It's just like the Tesla or an electric car, right? It comes out at first and it's a little clunky and there's not the best product offerings. I'm sure Jen has had plenty of experience with trying this product and it's not perfect yet. It's not a great product. It's not as good as a grass-fed double R ranch beef that's an hour from my house. I think there is some work to do on it, but I do think it's the right direction. And I think it's important that we're visiting that, just no different than what we talked about earlier with plant-based diets and bringing in protein in different unique formats. I grew up in a house with my mother being vegetarian. So, I mean, textured vegetable protein and all these other interesting things were a part of my diet. And so, like, I think it is something that we need to look at as a society only from the basis of, like, how much of an impact these proteins have on our world. And so I'm a meat eater. I love a good steak, but I'm certainly cognizant of the reality of what the effect of that experience is as well.
Yeah. Margaret just piped in. Hang on. Yes, Chris, incremental steps is a better product. Yes. Thank you, Miss Margaret. Jen, sorry.
I was going to say, I think right now where we're leaning, I think everybody went full force forward with, this is something new and cool. And then everybody suddenly, I don't know, Chris, if you had the same experience, but we definitely had experiences in volume where people are like, I'm sorry, you gave me something that has meat in it because some of the products were so good. I mean, you'd almost be in the dining room with the packages trying to go, you don't understand. This really is what it says it is. But I do think where we're focusing a lot of effort now while the dust settles a little bit in that zone is in the processed vegetable scenarios and things of that nature, and the impact that we can have in volume, which are things like using amaranth, are things like using seaweeds, are things like ube or whatever that may be. Trying to drive the grow around those demands is part of where we're trying to focus our sustainability efforts as far as menu planning and delivery. I think it's here to stay. I just think the jury's still out on which ones are the right ones. And then you start involving the sustainable carbon footprint scenarios related to all of them. And I think we're treading lightly in that water, but obviously offering it when it's, a passion project for people.
Very cool. Okay. So let's see. We've already talked about technologies a little bit. One of the things that I saw in a couple of different things is engagement and purpose, like purpose-driven food and beverage, which kind of ties exactly into what we were just talking about. But do you see that being even more so with just a sustainability, or is it Chris, you mentioned dietary or dietary restrictions, and I'm a huge advocate of making sure that everybody's fed and that they can get to the table in participating. But are we, and Jen, you actually also mentioned explaining where the story behind this. Are you getting more and more clients that are asking that, or are you going to just be doing it as this is part of how we share our food and beverage?
I can jump in on at least on that one for mine. I think where we're really leaning into it is that obviously as you get more volume, it's very easy to forget your why, right? And it's easy to lose that in what a meeting planner wants and what a client wants and what this game means to the local team or things like that. So we are absolutely wanting the story, right? If I'm passionate about making you this amazing dish that my mother always made for me, guess what? I care a whole lot about how it's made. I care about telling that to you. I care about using the right ingredients. All of the things that really make that event and experience special to the guests and pan come alive through that versus some of the other stories of, I'm not quite sure how this was grown and I'm not quite sure. Like when you get to sit there, like one example I have around it is did a ton of work for a lot of years with Chef's Garden, right? Not just in the restaurant. We always think of them in the restaurant setting, but I did a ton of work on their volume scenarios where they would have products that were at their absolute peak, but maybe weren't the exact diameter that a restaurant would want or something, right? I would buy all of that and it would become amazing heirloom tomato scenarios in high volume. And it was like telling the story going, yeah, but you don't really understand till you stand there and you see the way you grow a tomato like this. It's not, so it's all of those types of things that I think that's where it's at. People want to know who makes their food. They want to know where it came from. They want to know why it's on their menu.
Right. Yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah. I think it's so critical that it is, and Jen, speaking on your behalf, it's clearly ingrained into the culture. So it is for our organization as well. It's something that the employees drive because of their passion, and it's who we end up hiring as well. And they want to be a part of that. So no different when we were talking about where the world of teams are and bringing employees back, the passion's there. People believe in this and they want to be a part of that shift and that change. And so when we sell our menus, it is custom, it is from scratch, and that's not an option. That's how we produce. And so that's who we are. That being said, we've opened recently a smaller, more value-focused catering brand that is a little more quick service for corporate clients and things like that, where they're feeding 700 people in their offices daily. And that product, though, is still the healthy, locally focused product, but it's not quite as scratch. It's not quite as custom. And so we're still offering that, but it's still, it's still the essence of that experience. It's still the emotion of sourced regional products that still has that same health benefit, maybe on a different scope. And so I think regardless of what the level of that dining experience is, it's still focused around sustainability. It's still focused on regional sourcing. It's still focused on good, healthy products.
Awesome. Okay, we're at the 46 minute mark, but I have two questions left for you all. And Chris, especially you've got the drink bar service too. I want to talk about beverages. We've talked a lot about food, but Wine Enthusiast magazine said that low proof and no proof will become a part of the norm in 2024 and beyond. So I've had a really big challenge in getting them in hotels at events, and one catering service manager says, well, nobody ever wants those. They're not drinking them. How are you incorporating low and no proof beverages into your menus? And Amber, type in of whoever else is doing it. I mean, and to me, it's a moneymaker. It's an opportunity to make more money, enormously. But how are you doing it? And what do you think you'll see we'll all see in 2024?
So first thing is I'm from Utah. So we were the originator of the zero proof experience. Okay. We know about zero proof. Usually it comes out in the dirty soda bars and things like that. But all joking aside, it's such a critical thing. The world has realized, the benefits of not drinking alcohol, of having a sober living experience. And that's come from many things, but especially through COVID. I think a lot of people found some dark times with those experiences and wanted a little more clarity. And so in every major city, you're finding zero proof bars, mocktail lounges. Like it's such a big thing. And so vendors who are not providing that as an experience, it's time to catch up. I mean, it's really it's the moment for this. Even in Utah, we're starting to see pop-up shops and retail locations for zero proof. We have individuals coming to us selling Zilch, which is a product that does, it's like a champagne. And I swear to you, it actually has the beautiful essence of that, like that grape that's been sitting there for how many years. And it actually has some of that same experience so that you feel like you're still enjoying a good beverage without maybe the effects of the alcohol. So I think having those opportunities, those mocktails, and I just bought this book. I don't remember what it was called, otherwise I'd plug it for everybody, but it's so gorgeous. And it's all about how to make your own vodka, but it's zero proof. It's how to make your own whiskey, but it's zero proof. And it's the recipes and how to make it and then how to incorporate that. And it has all of those elements that for those of us who do love to drink, remember about what whiskey tastes like on your palate and what wine tastes like on your palate, so that the guests who are wanting that experience still feel like they're participating. You don't just want to order when we're trying to, like, we're hanging out with some of our colleagues and we'll sneakily order just like a tonic over with the garnish so that, so we don't have to feel like we have to rally until 4 a.m. But I think it's no different than what we're talking about with food, where it's like, it's not good enough just to serve a stuffed mushroom and intentionally beautifully do a stuffed mushroom. But that was the go-to of the past, right? Everybody gets a stuffed mushroom. And now it's like, we want the same experience in beverage, and it's such a robust offering. I mean, it's so many people are wanting it. Almost every bar is saying, hey, we want this, but we also need to make sure we have something that's available for our guests who aren't wanting to imbibe. So
awesome.
Well, this thing even add, just think about the popularity of experiential cocktails. So with the flavor blasters and the flaming and all those things, all those elements can still translate to non-alcoholic.
Beautifully.
It doesn't have to be a cocktail. You can still have those wow moments and the experiential aspect for those that, and people will buy it.
Right. The flavor. Yeah. The flavor of that. Jen, what about you? How are you doing that in convention centers?
Convention centers, obviously, when you can offer the experience and the story, yes. I would say in some of the larger formats and stadiums and some of those scenarios should be there. But when the general public's given the opportunity, you don't see a lot of movement on it. Mm-hmm. That having been said, I am shocked at how many conversations I've been in with food and beverage professionals in the last 6 months, all comparing not just on the drink portion of it, but the craft beer portions of it. And you don't understand, this one's much better than this one. And I really love it. And this, but all the same craft energy and enthusiasm around all the brewery elements. Same in that space. I mean, the competition is heavy. The beverage world has so overtaken. I don't think anybody anticipated how big that beverage component was going to be. I don't know if kombucha is going to be the long-term thing right everywhere, but I think the NA is here to stay.
Yeah, I do too. As a non-alcoholic drinker now, almost 4 years now, so it is. I love it, and having the flavors and the curation of it. Just like you're making a dish for me, I want that beverage to be curated. Okay, so to end out the year, to end out every show, I always ask everybody the same question: what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive mean to you? But looking at those three words and going into 2024, what does safety, sustainability, and inclusion mean in 2024?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
I think, here I am. I think that what's so critical is that it becomes seamless in our experience. That's what I hope for 2024, that it becomes incorporated, that we have safe, sustainable initiatives around all of our events, and incorporating that into our experiences so that it becomes something we have to talk about it still, obviously. That's what this is all about. But it's more about, like, how do we make sure that we teach our industry how to do the things that we are offering, right? Like I'm inspired by what Jen and Amber have shared, and Tracy, the experiences you've shared. I think that continuing to share these things is critical to make sure that our smaller colleagues, our larger colleagues, everybody's speaking that same language and has the same idea that we can provide our society, our cultures, all of these amazing experiences so that they can attend these events, have awareness around their dietary or restrictions or allergies and any of those needs, and that we can more succinctly offer those things. My marketing director is gluten intolerant, and I watch as we order lunch, the stress that creates for her, and the experience that happens when a guest shows up panicked because they didn't RSVP, which we won't talk too much about, but they are able to show up to the event, and we've already decided that we're going to do a percentage of our overage as a gluten-free meal. So I think having more awareness around that, and being more prepared with our teams in that experience is what my hope for 2024 is.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that the seamless portion of it is where the emphasis is, right? That nobody should have to feel, is my food safe? Whether it's physical safety, all the normal, time temperature safety, or allergen safety. Allergen is now absolutely the forefront as far as all those discussions go. But I do think where we're focusing a lot of our efforts and energy is that it doesn't feel like you're ordering a different meal, that it doesn't feel like, right, that it's just part of who we are. And we're not simply taking every inch of dairy, every inch of gluten, every inch of nuts out of every dish we do and calling that your day, right, the mushroom, right? But rather that we have solutions that allow you to pick and choose and experience the event the same way anybody else would, but rather just say, hey, could you give me a little more information on how this was made? Or when the question comes up, could I have it made this other way, that you get much more of a restaurant style response versus, sorry, that's not how we made it today. It wasn't on your BEO, or things of that nature, right? I think that seamless integration of all of those. And then on the inclusion part, specifically, I know where a lot of energy and attention that we have is the inclusion of ideas, right? The idea of not being afraid to fail because somebody wanted to do it in a little bit of a different way or things like that, but rather to explore that and feel that and see where it goes for us.
That's awesome. I love that. Amber?
Well, I'd also agree with the seamless, but I'd add maybe a little bit more transparency. So like not having to ask if something can be made gluten-free or can it be made vegan. I mean, just automatically have all those options available and visible.
Yep.
That's definitely where our energy is, right? It should just be there, right? There's no reason why half of your menus can't represent those categories. And then, because plenty of people may or may not care about their gluten intake, say, right? But will enjoy the dish. That way there's a ton of options in those scenarios.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to what Chris said too, is like when it tastes good, it doesn't matter that it's gluten-free, or it doesn't matter that it's vegan. And you all kind of reiterated that today, is that if it's a good quality food, it's made with thoughtfulness and love, and it tastes good, then everybody can eat it, right? So, well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate that, you being here with me today and sharing this. I love the end. This is a great end of the year topic to talk about going into the new year. And I wish the three of you the best for 2024 and happy holidays.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Oh, and
Thank you.
You're welcome. And actually, okay, if you want to get a hold of, let's see who's first. Jen you can find her at LinkedIn at Chef Jen B. And then we've got Amber. Of course, we're going to give the Catersource special event show because that's coming up, right? What are the dates of that, Amber?
February 12th to 15th.
In Austin. So, yep. So make sure you check them out on LinkedIn. And then Chris, I put everybody, reach out to him at luxevents.com. So I appreciate everybody being here, and thank you so much for your insight. It's valuable. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.